355 years. That is how long Hudson's Bay Company existed on Canadian soil. Founded in 1670, it predates Canada itself by
The Hudson's Bay Company, the store that built a country. A long time ago, before Canada was even a country, a group of traders, explorers, and First Nations people worked together to establish one of the oldest businesses in the world, the Hudson's Bay Company, HBC. The beginning of the fur trade.
more than 2 centuries. It survived the fall of empires, 2 world wars, the rise of the automobile, the invention of television, and the birth of the internet. And then, in March of 2025, it filed for bankruptcy protection, not with a bang, but with a quiet court filing and a memo that read like a company already gone. The question is not simply what went wrong. The question is, how do you kill something that old? To understand the collapse, you have to go back to the beginning, not the 1990s, not the 2008 financial crisis, all the way back to the 2nd of May 1670, when King Charles II of England signed a royal charter granting exclusive trading rights over an enormous stretch of North America to a group of English merchants. They called the territory Rupert's Land. It covered over 1.5 million square miles, roughly a third of the entire continent. The Hudson's Bay Company was not just a retailer. It was, for decades, a governing body. It controlled trade routes. It negotiated with indigenous nations. It employed thousands of fur traders and built forts across what would eventually become Canada. When Confederation happened in 1867, HBC was already nearly 200 years old. By the 20th century, the fur trade had given way to department stores. The iconic brick buildings on main streets across Canada became destinations. The striped blankets, the point system, the flagship store on Queen Street in Toronto, these were not just retail experiences. Few brands became as deeply stitched into Canada's national identity as Hudson's Bay Company. Walking into an HBC store felt, for many Canadians, like walking into something permanent. Then came Richard Baker. Since 2008, Hudson's Bay has been controlled by private equity investor Richard Baker, an American real estate mogul known for acquiring struggling retailers and leveraging their real estate assets. Baker saw HBC not primarily as a retailer, but as a real estate play. The store sat on some of the most valuable urban property in the country. That was the prize. Under Baker, HBC went on an aggressive expansion spree. The company acquired Saks Fifth Avenue in 2013 for roughly $2.4 billion. It launched Saks Off 5th as a discount offshoot. It expanded into Europe, opening department stores in Germany and the Netherlands. On paper, it looked like bold, strategic vision. In reality, it was a company stretching itself across markets it did not fully understand. Funded by debt and fueled by real estate optimism, to raise capital, the company sold off real estate assets, generating approximately $340 million. But selling the ground beneath your own feet is not a business strategy. It is a
crunch, but as you mentioned, Todd, those stores, those buildings right across the country are really at the center of this fight, as well as the Bay owns a lot of these properties, but also owes landlords roughly $1 billion. And so those are some of the issues that are being ironed out now.
Survival mechanism. And once the real estate was gone, what remained was a department store with no clear identity, no digital infrastructure to speak of, and a cost structure built for an era that no longer existed. The warning signs were visible long before 2025. HBC had been quietly hemorrhaging for years. Foot traffic in downtown retail had been declining since the mid-2010s. E-commerce was eating into every category HBC sold. Younger consumers were not shopping in department stores. They were shopping on their phones, from brands that spoke directly to them. HBC's response was sluggish. Their digital experience lagged competitors by years. While Amazon, Zara, and a new generation of direct-to-consumer brands were rewriting the rules of retail, HBC was still rearranging furniture in stores that felt increasingly like museums. Then came the pandemic. Downtown locations, which were already struggling, lost their entire customer base overnight. Office workers disappeared. Tourists vanished. The logic of a large format downtown department store collapsed completely. HBC cited declining consumer spending, ongoing global trade disruptions, and sluggish downtown recovery post-pandemic as factors in their financial challenges. there was one last attempt to reconnect with Canadian consumers. In August 2022, HBC announced plans to relaunch Zellers, the nostalgic discount retailer, both online and through physical store-in-store locations within Hudson's Bay stores. The first locations opened in March 2023. Canadians who remembered Zellers with warmth showed up out of curiosity. But nostalgia is not a business model. The Zellers relaunch generated headlines, not revenue. By early 2020
episode of Bankrupt. Canada has had major department stores come and go for centuries, much like many other nations and markets. It's the life cycle of retail, and it's not always forgiving, even to the most loved and cherished brands. The Hudson's Bay Company seemed to be an exception from that though, surviving over 350 years, becoming North America's oldest retailer, and even predating the very country it had come to iconically represent.
The numbers told a brutal story. Hudson's Bay's total sales fell by nearly a third in fiscal 2024, dropping to $1.1 billion from approximately $1.65 billion the previous year. Even more staggering was the nearly 50% collapse in e-commerce.
It would be just such a shame to lose that, and it's such a part of our culture.
With the Hudson's Bay Company filing for creditor protection to avoid bankruptcy last week, the two remaining locations in Winnipeg, like the one here behind me at Polo Park, could be in jeopardy. A potential blow for local residents, given the company's historical significance to the city.
We'll remember taking their kids downtown to Hudson's Bay. You know, the
sales, which dropped to $142 million from nearly $300 million in 2023. Hudson's Bay lost $329.7 million in the 12 months leading up to the 31st of January 2025. As of that date, the company had only $3.3 million in cash and owed more than $2 billion.
I can see why they would close down.
Vancouver's downtown location, one of 74 Hudson Bay stores across Canada, set to close by the end of June. The looming closure on the heels of Nordstrom's closure in 2023. One retail analyst says the downfall of the longtime department store could throw the future of downtown Vancouver's retail sector further into question.
Dollars in debt and leases, $3 million in cash. For a company with 80 stores and nearly 10,000 employees, that is not a runway. That is a cliff edge. The final straw appears to have been trade tensions between Canada and the United States, with increased geopolitical and economic uncertainty leading lenders to shun Hudson's Bay as it sought more financing, according to court documents. In March 2025, the company filed for creditor protection. Liquidation sales commenced at 74 Hudson's Bay department stores across Canada, with only 6 locations set to remain open. By June 2025, those remaining stores had also closed. Following the closure of its remaining stores and the subsequent sale of its intellectual property to Canadian Tire, the Hudson's Bay Company was formally renamed a numbered company in August 2025. By December 2025, the liquidation was essentially complete. As of February 2026, 8 people were still working at the company, compared to 9,364 when it had filed for creditor protection and a high of 70,000 employees back in 2006. 8 people, from 70,000 to 8 in 2 decades. Here's what the fall of Hudson's Bay actually teaches us, and it is not a lesson about e-commerce or pandemics. It is a lesson about identity. HBC was never primarily a retailer in the modern sense. It was an institution. And institutions can survive for centuries precisely because they mean something beyond their product. The moment HBC became a vehicle for real estate extraction, it lost the thing that made it irreplaceable.
Shift in Canada's retail landscape. Hudson's Bay Company announces major store closures. In a surprising development, Hudson's Bay Company, Canada's oldest retailer with a history spanning over 350 years, has announced plans to liquidate all but 6 of its stores nationwide. This decision affects 80 Hudson's Bay department stores, 3 Saks Fifth Avenue locations, and 13 Saks Off Fifth shops across Canada.
It stopped being a Canadian institution and became just another leveraged buyout. Every strategic move thereafter, the Saks acquisition, the European expansion, the Zellers revival, was an attempt to solve a revenue problem that was actually an identity problem. When you no longer know what you are,
because Woodward, Sears, they've all gone now. This is the last of the big guys. And with sales already showing up left and right, these shoppers are checking on what's left of the bay.
We might take advantage of the sale. It's not what I came in to do today necessarily, but might look at it, but...
No acquisition fixes that. Retailers that survive disruption do so because their customers feel something about them. HBC had that feeling once. By the end, the striped blanket was still on the shelves, but the soul of the company had already been sold. The Hudson's Bay Company built Canada's retail landscape, and then it was gone. 355 years ended with a court filing and empty shelves. If this story made you think about how identity and ownership shape the fate of businesses, there's a lot more where this came from on this channel. Subscribe, drop your thoughts in the comments, and let us know which company you want to see covered next. Because every collapse has a story, and most of them started long before anyone noticed.